It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. Today's guest is Legally Nik. She's a child protection lawyer from the UK. There it is. Okay, I see you, Nikki. You're the first one. let me see. I'm time. It's much better when we can see each other. I don't know why sometimes the camera. Oh, it's perfect. Okay. Yay.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so before you even introduce yourself, I'm going to throw a question at you from someone in our community because I think let's start off with something relatable. So we know someone who's got a very young child, a preschooler, and of course there's been domestic violence involved in the past, emotional abuse, all kinds of other things. And so they've been separated for a while, and this young child is his birthday is coming up. So his father has been saying to the child, "Mom's not letting us enjoy a birthday party together." And so the child is coming back to the mother saying, "Mom, I'm really angry because you're making Daddy sad. Daddy wants to have a party with all of us." And our person is like, "What do I say? How do I deal with this?"
Yeah, I don't think that's meant to be easy. Yeah, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that question. And I don't want to say, I never want to put somebody in a position where they are unsafe, whether it be physically or emotionally. We don't know where we're going to be this time next year. We could be in a completely different sort of headspace. So I feel like you need to not, so much easier said than done, but don't take on the burden of guilt that is going to come with not being able to share a birthday with the entire family, the paternal and the maternal side. And just maybe as gently as possible, try and talk to the child about how it's not going to be possible this year. We're going to really try and make it work for next year. Mummy's got a lot of things going on at the moment. We don't need to go into detail as to what's. You don't need to mirror the behaviour of what Dad is doing.
So no explanation to this young child. Just kind of like busy, not going to work.
I don't think so. Listen, I'm not a therapist, but when I've spoken to therapists before in relation to my own personal situations and things, they've always hammered home to me that we make it so much larger in our head than it actually is. So for a child, it can be actually so much more black and white. That dad has gone and planted those seeds in the child's head. Let that be. When we talk about this in the years to come, there's going to be reflection points. Mum can talk about it, and that child's going to understand that what Dad did was wrong. We don't need to get into the tit for tats of it all. And don't put yourself, protect your peace. You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You don't need to put yourself in that uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. And I see there's a common dad or mom. Yeah, this just happened to be where it was a dad and a mom, but we are very gender friendly, both of us, all of us.
Friendly, whatever. Yeah. It's just this situation directly.
Yes, we know that abuse is a human issue, and we have a number of male clients as well as female clients. So we definitely empathize. And we have the male half of Been There, Got Out, who is on here right now. So we're very friendly to men and women because everyone's suffering and we all want the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Nikki, why don't you introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are? You're known as Legally Nik, and you're a child protection lawyer, but what does that mean?
Okay, so yes, I'm Legally Nik here on Instagram and on TikTok, and I'm just I tend to just give bits of advice to better equip you to represent yourself, whether it be inside or outside of the courtroom. That's sort of my little tagline, and I always say that I prefer it to be outside of the courtroom. And I am a child protection solicitor, so I used to be specialising in private family law, so I would deal with all the issues that you'd see in the private family court system, divorce, separation, fighting over the custody of the kids, etc. And then I moved over about several years ago into solid child protection. So my clients are social workers. So they are my primary client base. I give a lot of advice online which connect to single parents, separated parents, and I talk a lot about safeguarding issues that can relate to both public and private law.
So your clients are the people who are dealing with children directly, like in America, we call it attorney for the children or custody evaluators or guardian ad litems, or are they more therapists dealing directly with the children and families?
So they are dealing with the issues with the children and families. So when the state have to intervene if there are serious safeguarding concerns. So if we have to obtain care orders, or if we have to deal with adoption issues, etc. Those are the sorts of cases that I'm dealing with.
So that's amazing because in America, we hear a lot of complaining about how professionals who do evaluate children are not trained. They don't understand a lot of the issues. So I think it's amazing that, you know, you understand a lot with trauma and domestic violence and that you're able to train professionals. I don't know if something like that exists here.
Yes, yeah, I mean, like, it's just what I've done for several years. It's what I enjoy. I feel like I can also bring a lot of insight to the private family law sector, because I get a lot of messages from parents saying, I've tried to contact social services about this issue, they don't want to know about it, and it's usually that they don't want to know about it because it doesn't meet their threshold of concern. So, you know, not that does it need to meet your threshold of concern, but we need to be putting it on a sort of level as to how far you want to take it, even in a private family court system. So yeah, I hope it helps across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, these cases we know, well, Chris and I with Been There, Got Out, we only deal with really high conflict cases. So all of our clients are dealing with some kind of domestic violence, and this can get obviously really emotional. And our community tends to be overwhelmed, terrified, dealing with a very difficult parent on the other side. But I know that you had said that it's very important to try to separate emotion, your personal emotion, from the pain of what you're going through with your ex, especially when children are involved, which can be so hard. So can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to sort of try at least to separate?
It's so difficult, I think, especially when you're dealing with high conflict, because if your ex has been abusive to you, it's the most natural thing to believe and feel and fear that they're going to be abusive and harmful to your child. So I think when it comes to your situations, Lisa, like the clients that you have, I can completely respect the fears that they're going through and the things that they're dealing with. For me, it's more of the situations whereby you've separated over really like the adult issues, cheating. You've just fallen out of love, you don't get on anymore, you're not agreeing on things, you've got family conflicts, whatever they might be. And people get into the rut of the tit for tat, of wanting to hurt each other. And what they do is they can't help it. I think we spoke about this previously, that they just tend to weaponize the child against their other parent, and they may not even actively be conscious that they're doing it. They think they may even be protecting them by doing it, but in fact they're causing so much damage to the child and potential damage to the future relationship that they are going to be able to have with their child in the future, because they, like I say, like they will grow and they will know, they will look back, they will understand. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get you now to have some insight into what you're doing, the choices that you're making, and to just slow down. That's all. Just slow down, reflect, be in your feelings, and then understand that your feelings are separate to the feelings of the child and what is in the best interest of the child.
Yeah, I mean, don't you feel like kids know a lot more than we think they do at any age, and they pick up on those really hard emotions?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like, if I just reflect on like my own childhood, like my parents were very combative, and I just always remember my one parent spoke a lot more than the other parent, but my eyes saw everything. So you didn't need to say it. I was already seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the the words didn't help. It was already a very difficult situation. It didn't need the added pressure of trying to trying to circle that judgment onto the child. It wasn't necessary. So yeah, I'm just very, very conscious of that. And even speaking about your ex negatively to friends whilst the children are there, they just pick up on everything. I really do know that. I believe that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't even have time to get into like loyalty conflicts today, all of
Right.
that, but that's a big issue. Now, I know you said that you like to do the least intervention approach
Yeah.
versus going to court. Talk about what that means. What's the least intervention?
So I'm basically trained to take the least interventionist approach when it comes to my cases, and I would uh, put that onto like private family law situations as well. The court system is obviously a very expensive one. There are significant delays. This is how we get into the tit for tats. You have to you go back into a situation where people become fixated on who the judge is going to believe and prefer. It's just it's stressful. Like I said, it's costly. It's just, if you can avoid it, that is what I'm going to always encourage you to do. But I feel like you don't need to. You can, there's so many other options available to you before the court process, so like mediation, getting family and friends involved, um, you know, parenting apps and such. I just feel like it's the very last road to take, and if I can encourage you to have some insight into your behaviors and how to communicate with your ex better, etc., then that's what I'm here to try and do. However, I completely appreciate that when it comes to the clients that you're dealing with some really high conflict exes, right? Whereby court is sometimes the only option. And at the end of the day, court is available to you for a reason. But I think that the court should only be available to those situations.
Right, but I'm glad that you touched on the fact that I think pop culture influences all of us, where we assume that the justice system is a place to get justice very quickly and harshly, and that if our clients or people, dealing with these situations, just go in and tell a judge the truth, that a judge is going to come down and punish, and then everything's going to be a lot better. And can you say what it's really like?
It's really just not like that.
I
um,
know.
yeah, it's just really not like that. It's just, for me, it's just the delays, it's the paper pushing. Um, you've got like several different people coming at you. You've got Cafcass officers, you've got this one's left and that one's left and that one's coming in, and they're coming late with that statement, and that's going to impact my statement, and I need a right to respond. And it's, yeah, so
And
I mean,
money
yes,
during all these delays.
and money is being thrown everywhere. I mean, I get a lot of the comments that say that, you know, family lawyers encourage the tensions and you know, to prolong it, etc. That's obviously not my experience. I want to get rid of these cases as quickly as possible. It's not actually fun for us, for anybody. But there's nothing that we can do about how the court operates, and the court operates slowly, and that is not what is in the best interest of the child. So you're just delaying either the potential relationship that they could have with a safe parent, or you're delaying permanency for the child. So yeah, I just I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah, I know. And also it's like you lose so much power when you put your family's life and everything, your safety, your children's safety in the hands of strangers.
Yeah, somebody else.
Sometimes it's absolutely necessary.
Yes,
We know.
absolutely. Like I get messages all the time saying, you know, my ex isn't letting me see my child. I've tried all sorts. I said, okay, we'll take it out of their hands and you put it into somebody else to adjudicate on the matter, because, you know, we're not getting anywhere where we are. So you can take it out of that person's hand and you can put it into somebody else's. But otherwise, I don't know why you are going to want to, if it's a situation where you are weaponizing, you're trying to control, I don't know why you would want to prolong the inevitable. It's just going to cause pain. It's just going to cause you pain. It's going to cause them stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
so there's a question that just came out. I've missed some of them, but
yeah.
and I want to see what you have to say. I know what we have to say. Can a 13-year-old decide who they want to live with?
Okay, so legally, in the UK, you can a child can decide at 16 who they want to live with, but the voice of the child is going to be taken very seriously at 13, because essentially they're going to vote with their feet. So if it's a situation whereby they're saying, I want to live with mum and that's it, I can't imagine many courts are going to say no. It's obviously very much a case-by-case basis. I don't know the details, but the voice of the child is taken far more seriously from 11, 12, 13 onwards.
Yeah, and that's interesting because in America, it's not exactly like that. There's like, I mean, just like yours, it's like a series of best interest factors, and that's just one of them. But I think, I know in Georgia at 14, a child can decide, but I've spoken to lawyers in Georgia who said they really don't like that law because a lot of kids have been turned against another parent in a divorce proceedings. And so many states will still say that legally a child has to go to the other parent, or they'll try to do all kinds of things to make sure that the relationship can't be salvaged before they just say, okay, we're just going to believe whatever you say, and then that's the end of it.
I mean, usually like a Cafcass officer will obviously become involved and will be taking the direct wishes and feelings of the child, and the welfare checklist will be considered, and all of that. And it's not an overnight process. Like I said, the court process, the family law court process, is a lengthy one. But more often than not, their voice, because it's the voting with their feet. So it's,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it's tricky. Okay, so we touched on before when someone made the comment about man versus women that your content is as genderless as possible, and ours is as well. So talk a little bit about the people that absorb your content.
So I try to make it as genderless as possible. I absolutely do. I don't tend to say mother, father in any of my videos, well, recent videos anyway. I mean, I've been doing this since May of last year, and I've become so much more aware of the language that I use. Because people have written to me, like such kind people have written to me and told me how they feel about it. So I'm really, really conscious of the language that I do use in my videos. I have like an 80% female following. So it is largely female based. The 20% male following are wonderful, and I welcome them. But yeah, the problem is that the majority of my followers are female, and they are the primary carers. So then the non-residents that I have following me, they are always asking me, what can I do? I'm not being allowed the contact that time that I want. I've tried various ways of trying to get extra contact. and it's not working for me and I don't know what else to do. And I only have one advice, and that's mediation, court. And it's like I can't keep repeating, obviously, the same cycle of advice. But there is nothing more that I can say to you, because if somebody is withholding something from you and you can't get into it, you have to give that. You have to give that issue to the court. You have to give that issue to the judge. So that is why I think a lot of my content tends to be about empowering primary and residents, making them feel good about themselves, but also helping them understand that it's healthy, beneficial to the child to have a solid relationship with both parents.
Yeah. Okay. And this sounds like a question. I'm just going to throw it in between. Does it, because it's different in America and the UK, does a person with parental responsibility need permission to take their child abroad for a week? They thought there was a 28-day rule. We don't have something like that. It depends on a parenting plan.
Okay, so the 28-day rule is in relation to whether you have a lives with order. So if you have a lives with order, then you can take the child out of the country for up to 28 days. However, if there is a child arrangements contact order, then you still need permission to take that child out of the country if that holiday falls into their contact time. If you do not have any order and both mum and dad have obviously mum has parental responsibility, but if dad has parental responsibility, you need to be able to obtain their permission to take the child out of the country. So both of you need to be able to request that permission from each other. So that is another thing that I get a lot in my inbox, and it is another tit for tat issue that I receive. This person didn't let me take my child on holiday, so I'm not going to let them take the child on holiday. It burns my soul. So yeah, this is another example of just not like putting your ego aside, putting the child first. The child would probably love a holiday with their parent. You cannot control how the other parent is behaving. The court process is open to you for that, but it doesn't mean that you have to say no because they've said no to you.
Yeah. So speaking of that, getting back into the conflict between the parents, you had said that a parent should not share every bit of information with a child of what's going on. I mean, why not? I can imagine, but let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like we need to be child focused. The child does not need to know every single thing. We can parent with grace, and we can parent with love, and we can parent with honesty without having to share every experience of pain that parent has put us through, because you are going to grow one day. Like, your children are going to grow one day. They're going to reflect on this time. You're going to tell them about the storm that was raging at this point in your life, and you're going to explain that you were the one that was sheltering them from that rain. So we don't need to be doing that for children years. It's not necessary. You're just going to be changing the projection of the relationship that they could possibly be having with actually an emotionally safe parent. And so I'm not a fan of that. And I do get comments on some of my videos saying, I'm not going to lie about the abuse that I've been experiencing, and this is not me telling you to lie, but it's me telling you to maybe, depending on if it's appropriate, but you can hold back something.
Yeah.
You know,
I think sometimes we as adults, I know we do this. If we assume that without realizing it, we think the child has as much experience as we do. So we think if we explain something to the child that they should understand it. But like you said before, kids see things in black and white a lot of times. Like, they don't really care as much about the issues that feel that important to us because they're children. They don't have that wealth of experience and filters that we have. They don't have they don't have a frontal lobe, like they don't have judgment.
No, you're right. And I just think it's too much it's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It's confusing when you're already you've seen that your parents have separated, you're not living together anymore, or there's combat going on, and you're like conflict, and you're seeing it. And then a mum or a dad turns around to you and said, like the dad in the first situation you were telling me about, and says, mummy doesn't want you to have a birthday party. Like, what positive is coming out of that?
Right.
How is that child focused in any way? How can you call yourself an emotionally safe parent when you're doing something like that? Now, the court aren't going to say that you can't have contact with that child anymore because of it, but you still want to be able to have a relationship, a beautiful relationship with your child, right? So I always say that you have to make choices that help you sleep better at night, and those are not the right choices to make. So yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the ones that are doing things like that usually have some kind of personality disorder or mental issue, so they're not really capable of that sort of
Yes.
empathy.
Listen, if you've got a personality disorder, if we truly have a narcissistic personality disorder, if we've got something going on like that, then good God, this probably does need to go into the court's hands. I don't want you to be dealing with that alone. We need psychiatric assessments. We need psychological assessments. You need that support. Otherwise, if you're just somebody that's just really damn toxic, can't deal with the breakup, doesn't want to be seen as the bad person, you just need to take yourself away in a corner and go get a bit of therapy. Breathe it out a little bit, and don't make that your child's problem.
Right. All right, let's talk about the controversial label of parental alienation. Elephant that nobody like the label. So, we are I'm a domestic violence advocate. Like, I'm hearing that I know that parental alienation, the label parental alienation syndrome, was developed by a very disreputable person who was a pedophile and killed himself and junked science and all kinds of
not ideal.
right. However, we also see in our clients' lives, almost more than anything, the domestic violence that is an abusive person who, once the relationship is over, says in so many ways to a child, you're either with me or against me. So if you love me, then you need to discard that other parent like I did or like they did to me. And so I believe that whatever you want to call it, that it is a form of domestic violence to weaponize a child and make them choose one parent because of whatever reason. So what do you think of that term? And is there a better way to say it that's not like harmful to domestic violence victims? Because every professional that I speak to uses that term.
Use that term.
Every lawyer I speak to is like, that's the term that we currently use. But then the UN and World Health Organizations and now new legislation in Canada is like, no, we're not allowed to. You don't say that term. But just because you don't say that term doesn't mean that whatever it is doesn't exist.
Yeah, until I'm told by the family court that I'm not to use that term, it's the only term that I understand and I know. So that's why I use it. I've had the same messages about the UN and etc. And I'm happy to read the articles. I'm happy to read what people send to me. I'm happy to be further educated. But in the UK, it is a form of child abuse.
Yeah.
So that's how I have to take it. And I do see it, and we spoke earlier about this, about how people may not even realize that they are doing it.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of that, Nikki? Like what are some things because I see the same thing, and we've interviewed custody evaluators who have said, like, here's some things that you do that you don't even realize, like sending poisonous messages.
The reason why it's so difficult is because it can be such a slow burner. So it could be purposely avoiding the parents' phone calls so that they don't speak to the child. It could be the obvious, which is negatively speaking about that parent, negatively speaking about their wider family, and doing that consistently. feeding that into the child to the degree that they are then disrespectful to that other parent, and changes the way that they are now beginning to see that other parent. It can be trying to make excuses in order to avoid parenting time for that other parent, contact time, putting like birthday parties, or like, oh no, let's go and hang out with your cousins this weekend, or like trying to just steer the child away from
Like, oh, there's
things.
more fun things here. And like, shouldn't we let our child decide what they want to do? Like, aren't you going to allow them to do the fun thing? Why would you want to interfere with their fun with your presence?
That's not child focused. Like, so, there's like that gaslighting going on. Yes. And so like I said, it can be a very slow burner because one may not even realize that they're doing it. I've spoken to friends before where I've seen it, but I can see that they don't see what they're doing.
That is so hard. I know people also, even our clients sometimes, where I'm like, how can I tell them don't do that?
Do you know what I said? I said to one friend, it's because she has two fathers, two different children. And I said, you wouldn't do that to this one, but you're doing it to this one because you don't like this one, because this one shows you appreciation and you communicate well with this one, but this one there's conflict. So you're making choices that are like don't help. They just fuel the fire. So you've got to be careful of what you're doing. I don't think you're consciously doing it, but here's a slight mirror, and let's see if you can have a look in that. People feel uncomfortable with that. People do feel uncomfortable with it, but
it's almost like telling someone how to parent.
It's very cringe. Yeah, it's very cringe, but they're there with you for a reason, right? So I hope that their ears would be open to the advice.
Yeah. Actually, so one thing that Chris and I have started teaching is not just the best interest factors, but going through what we call the alienation factors based on the model by Dr. Amy Baker that's actually used to build an alienation case. And so, but it was fascinating because I interviewed her personally and she went through like what everything means. And I was like, this makes sense. And I think it's important for everyone to understand what it means and what those cases are built on, because you need to make sure you're not doing it. So the way we get our clients to listen to us is to go through it and be like, ooh, you can't do that. Like sometimes people will say, well, since I'm the primary, like I have sole legal decision making, so I don't want to share the medical records. Like I shouldn't have to, let the other person know that the kid is going to the doctor. And we're like, no, actually, you still do. Because even though you have final say, that doesn't mean the child is yours.
Right. People do get that very, very confused. It's very difficult, Lisa, because here you only need to share the serious medical issues that are going on. The day-to-day, he's gone to the doctor because he's got a cold, doesn't technically need to be shared. But what does need to be shared is the details of the doctor.
Right.
So that other parent can obtain that information if they so wish.
Same.
Yes.
And by removing, by removing another, if someone's still a parent, unless there's some kind of like they've lost parental rights or restraining order, whatever, they're still a parent, their name should still be listed, like on the school and medical records, and they should still have access. But I think a lot of people think that doesn't have to be true. Right. And they don't realize if they remove that parent's information, they could be harmed in the legal system.
That's a problem. Yeah, that's evidence that builds up a case, right?
Right, because why would you do that?
Right, exactly. So, but like I said, it's just an overtime. Do you have a lot of clients that are suffering from PA?
Yes.
Yeah.
We do. And that's why, like, we're working on our current book now about that topic, like what to do when your toxic ex is trying to brainwash the kids, because it's so prevalent in our community. And I did a free webinar maybe 3 weeks ago on just the factor of the sending the poisonous messages. And I'm developing a bigger course on the whole thing that's probably going to be a couple of hours, but it is really, really tricky. It's astonishing how common it is. And there's so much shame around the issue for the parent that's been targeted versus the preferred parent, because they're just like, people don't understand it and they feel like, oh, your kid's not talking to you. Well, of course you must be a terrible person. They don't just like they don't understand domestic violence. They see it as just physical. They don't understand everything behind coercive control and the insidious nature of how these things get to this point.
Yeah, it's very, very painful. I have had a number of messages in my inbox, primarily from dads, who have, I mean, I remember one, actually, I think it was two, that said, am I a bad person if I can't do this anymore? Should I just wait for them to find me when they're older? And I was like, I can't tell you. I can't tell, like, I can read from your message how much pain you're in. I cannot tell you to stop this or to keep going. Only you can decide on that. But it's painful. It's very painful.
You know what's interesting about that is, so you've heard from dads. We have a lot of women who are dealing with the alienation behaviors, and often money has been used to lure children away, like money and expensive gifts. But in terms of that question, that's something I talked about in the webinar. Like, should I just wait for the kids to figure it out? No, you shouldn't just wait. You shouldn't, because what happens is when you pull back from trying, you're basically affirming the abusive person's message that you are unloving, unsafe, and unavailable. So you pulling back and not at least trying is saying, yeah, see, that person, like, you are this, you don't care enough about the relationship with your child to at least keep trying. Even if that child is not responding, I know it's beyond heartbreaking.
So what if you're in the court process for a lengthy amount of time, and it's just not going your way? At what point do you say that you should do it all the way to the end until a decision is made, or would you say to somebody, if you can't keep going, then you can back down?
It's definitely a personal choice, but like, I would think about what we talked about is like a major custody factor is which parent is showing they're supporting the relationship with the other parent, and which parent is doing the opposite and attempting to undermine that other parent's relationship. So if it's a client of ours that's dealing with someone who's trying to turn the kids against them, we do a lot of documentation to start showing that person's patterns of behavior, like being very aware of what are they withholding contact and communication, are they trying to undermine that other parent's authority, and have, like, we call it strategic communication with the parent to sort of be like, I don't understand why this is happening, why, you know, the gifts I gave got thrown away, like why I've been abruptly cut off, or I can't get through even though I have court ordered time. And you know, every situation is different, but I think documentation is really important, because you can't use the labels, just like you can't say narcissism.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't even say abuse. Don't say parental alienation or something like that. Just show what is going on and how it ties back to that custody factor of, like, it feels like my relationship with my child is being undermined based on these behaviors, and let the professionals involved draw their own conclusions. But that is, the burden is on you to document it properly. And that's like a lot of what we teach people how to do through writing and communication specifically. But in terms of, like, giving up, like, it's certainly up to a person, because it's like you're grieving someone that's still alive. It's constant rejection. But the thing that I said on the webinar, and then I'll say here too, is like, if you give up, what's the child left with? That's the life, like, that's what they will learn is appropriate behavior, is like you just toss someone out, and that's the end of it. If you don't get your way, you just get rid of somebody.
Yeah.
You know, like they will, that's all they have left. an abusive parent. So is that what you want to leave your child with? You know, and that, I mean, it's such a complex issue. It's not like, oh, keep going no matter what, but there's a lot. And it's not like they suddenly will just wake up.
No.
If you've been out of their life for 20 years, what would make them suddenly wake up?
I mean, unless they then have that similar conflict with that parent, which is heartbreaking. But yes, I would just like circling back to what you said in relation to documenting everything. That is the most important and prevalent thing that you can do. You have to write everything down. You may not, like, even if it's a conversation that you don't have recorded, it's, you know, if ideally everything should be written, like text messages, emails, etc. But if it was a missed call, if it, like whatever it is, I just would want to see a very detailed diary of it all, because that's the evidence that you're going to have when you go to court.
Yeah. So we do, like, we talk about like diaries and journals, but for us, we say the most effective is when it's a conversation in writing over an app or something where you're giving the parent the opportunity to respond.
Yeah.
You're questioning in a certain way, where you're appearing as like a very, you're the best co-parent ever, and that you're sort of confused by this thing that happened or
Yes.
their behavior. Not like you did this, you did that, then you look back.
Yeah.
So it's very
that's amazing.
strategic.
That's very, very good. Very good.
Yeah. So so speaking of that, what's your opinion about if someone's a bad partner, are they a bad parent?
Yeah, I mean that is I was actually thinking about that before I came on this call, and I agree and disagree. So I feel like if, for example, somebody cheats on you, that's terrible, horrible. That is a problem within that person, and that has impacted the relationship that you two have. But I don't think that that pain that they have caused you necessarily makes them a bad parent to your child. They can have a loving, beautiful, growing relationship with their children, and it doesn't have to affect that. However, if a parent is abusive towards you, verbally aggressive, puts you down, belittles you, shames you, I do not understand how that partner can be a good parent. Because especially if you are the primary parent to that child, how can you be working at your best if you are constantly drawn down? So for me, at that point, that's when I'm going to say, yes, there is going to be, there is a relevance to being a bad partner and being a bad parent. Your primary parent has to be good. He has to be good. And if they're not, and it's due to the way that you are treating them, then that's a problem. That's a problem for your child.
Yeah. What about, like, let's talk about Cafcass. What is Cafcass?
Okay, so Cafcass is, they are hired on behalf of the court to prepare reports, various statements, when you issue your initial family proceeding application. So whatever application that you make to the court in relation to your child, whether it be for contact, whether it be for residence, whatever it might be, the Cafcass are going to call you, the officers of the court are going to call you, just get a flavour of who you are, get your name, you know, your details, why you've made the application, report. They may even be doing police checks on you. Report that back to the court. They're the ears and eyes of the court, of the child for the court, and then when you get to court, depending on whether you're able to agree or not, if you're not, then Cafcass may be requested to prepare a Section 7 assessment.
Does this happen with every separation or divorce that involves a child, or only if it's problematic?
Only if it's problematic.
I was going to say, oh my gosh, how do you
No, no,
keep
no.
up?
Only if it's problematic. So only
Okay.
if we're having to go to court over the child. So only if somebody's had to make an application to the court in order to deal with contact or residency.
Is it,
But you haven't been able to.
is it in any way like we have child protective services?
So no,
Is it like that?
they're not connected to
Okay.
child protection. They're not connected to social services. They're separate. They are just officers of the court directly, while social services are like for the government,
Uh-huh.
as well as the court if they're asked to be drawn in. So Cafcass are directly for the private family court. And yeah, so they will be asked to prepare a Section 7 assessment to discuss the issue at hand and to basically touch on the welfare checklist. And that will be to basically draw in the wishes and feelings of the child, what are in the best interests of the child, look at the current circumstances of the child, what changes may be happening, you know, look at their education, etc., etc. Cafcass will want to meet with you and talk to you. They will want to meet with your ex, talk to your ex. They may want to sit in with contact. They may want to talk to your child if it's age appropriate. They will prepare their report, give it in, and say whether it's a yay or nay for them based on whatever the application is. And the court, I think it's like 93% likely to go with what the Cafcass recommendation is.
What you just answered my next question, because I was going to say how likely is a judge to listen to it? So it almost sounds like a custody evaluation-ish thing.
Yes, yes, yeah, essentially. So they're going to be like, for example, if somebody's making a contact order application, Cafcass is going to make their recommendations as to how much contact that person should be having or shouldn't be having, why, an evaluation, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So what about like who pays for Cafcass?
So it doesn't really work in relation to who pays for Cafcass because you're within the court proceedings. So there isn't a who pays for Cafcass. Somebody's paid for the initial application, and then the court pays for Cafcass.
Oh my gosh. Okay, pause right there. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know you guys have coercive control laws and we're just starting to get them here, but in America, we pay like tons and tons of money for custody evaluation, like sometimes $20,000.
So where the money is going to come in is when you're dealing with psychological reports, psychiatric reports, drug test reports, all those sorts of things. So
Okay.
those things are going to also feed in to the Cafcass report. Okay? So that's where lots of money is where you can't get away from having to pay for all of that.
Okay. I was like, oh my gosh, it's free. Wow.
No,
But
no,
of course not.
no.
Of course not.
So yeah, if you're in a conflict, then you're going to require evidence of the things that are problematic, and you may need to be requesting psychological, psychiatric, drug test results, hair strand testing, liver functioning tests, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And those are going to feed into the Cafcass report.
Do people get really frustrated with Cafcass like they do here, and why?
Oh yes. So do you know what? I don't think I realised how much people dislike, are frustrated with Cafcass until I started Legally Nik.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was just doing a video preparing you for, your initial meeting with Cafcass. And it was just like a barrage of comments. And I actually noticed it on another solicitor's video as well. And I remember seeing her being like, oh, I didn't realise everybody had this issue with Cafcass, because as professionals, as professionals, we don't really see it because they are professionals in our eyes, and we communicate with them as fellow professionals. But it was only when I started doing little Google searches that it was like, no, okay, so people are very frustrated, just as how they can be frustrated with social services. So that was a little bit like, okay, I'm getting it a little bit more now, because obviously the social services are my clients. So Cafcass are overworked, they're under budget, they're underpaid, they like oversubscribed. It's hard work. There's a constant churn
Mm-hmm.
of officers, so it's incredibly frustrating for the parents involved. It's already incredibly painful process to have to go through, and then when you feel like you're not being heard or you haven't been given the appropriate time to explain your situation or frustrations, and then the worst case is when you get these messages that say, I didn't even say that, or um, they've taken it out of context, or
Yep.
you didn't hear anything I said. They haven't added that. I thought like that's a huge thing. So, and these things can be challenged. Your Cafcass report can be challenged, but you're often encouraged not to do that because of the.
Same. All this is exactly the same. I feel like, Nikki, we should do a whole
We could,
separate thing on just that,
yeah, we could.
because
We could.
that's what Chris and I spend a huge amount of time teaching, is we call it presentation, like how to appropriately present to these other people besides the judge that get involved with the case.
Right, that's
Because they're
amazing.
used to angry people, and you don't want to come in with the
No,
wrong approach.
so yeah, I have a video on my page about taking your emotion out of it. It's just so much easier said than done. I know that, but I
Yeah.
feel like if you can have just a little bit of advice from a professional that's telling you how to present yourself, then um, this is what the wonderful world of social media can now help people with. Um, because people were just like going straight in and pouring as if it was a therapy session. And
Yeah.
the Cafcass officer is not your therapist,
Right.
and you need to look logical rather than fully emotive. And
Right. And you have to organize. I mean, there's a lot
it's a plan.
involved. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's for another day. That's like a big thing. People sometimes send a little text DM, how do I prepare for a custody evaluator? I'm like, big
Just
time
have a big
consuming
meeting on
question.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fully
Yeah.
got it.
All right. So speaking of well, not exactly presentation, but jumping into the issue, and I'm looking at the time. We've only got a couple more minutes. I knew this was going to fly. But say your ex has a new partner. How do you deal
Yes.
with that with your child when also there's all these big emotions?
Yeah. So again, really painful. And I sympathize greatly. I always say, like, you need to take some time for yourself to deal with those emotions. These are adult emotions, they are not your children's issues. Okay. I just want you to, the only thing that you need to be concerned about and worried about is whether that person is a safe person to be around your child. If we know that they are safe, tick, good. So now you need to be able to get a handle of your feelings and your emotions. Take yourself away for a minute. Do that. I just would really, I want to encourage parents to be able to talk to each other so that they can have a conversation before there are meetings, so that we can have that level of respect for one another. And if we can do that, I think that would ease the pain of those new introductions. Let us have boundaries for those introductions. This isn't your new stepmother or stepfather. Perhaps can we meet that person first? Like and ease into the situation would be ideal. If not, we cannot control how another person behaves. We can only control our reactions to it. So keep it classy, parent with grace, co-parent with grace, and just know that this is your issue, not your child's.
Yep, easier said than done.
Yeah.
Again, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of that, we talked about self-regulation, the importance of self-regulation, which kind of fits into exactly what you're saying. What do you think, as a professional, what do you think it's important that the kids see for parents dealing with issues like what we've talked about?
I just want I want the children to be able to see as least conflict as possible. So you know, one day they're going to ask you about your relationship and why it broke down and how you dealt with that all. And I want them to be able to turn around and say, like, what, that was happening? I had no idea.
Yeah.
No, you didn't have any idea because it wasn't your issue. It wasn't your problem. We were out here, you know, doing our thing, but we didn't need to spill it onto you. So that is the primary message that I try to send out to people, that if you need to write that angry text and get it out of your system and then delete it, you can do that. If you need to journal your feelings, if you need to meditate, if you need to go and speak to your friend, have a glass of wine, like just go on a night out, like whatever, just do not spill it over onto your children.
Yeah. So my kids are now 20 and my son's going to be 24 in a few days. And he did a podcast a few years ago. He was over 18, so he was a young adult, and he could talk about these issues freely. But he did a podcast called Slam the Gavel. And before he did it, we had said that we had asked our followers and audience if there were questions that they had to ask the child of someone who had grown up with a situation like this. And one of the most common questions that he got was, what did your one parent do, like your safe parent, do to make this as painless as possible? And I didn't know what he was going to say. So I was just like listening to the podcast, and he said, my mom kept it together. That was it. She kept it together. So I didn't realize that I was doing some of the things I should have been doing, but a big part for me was getting that support and getting a lot of support during those initial first years and thereafter, of course. And so I think it really is important for people in these situations to get support, even though there's so much shame associated with what you're dealing with, even though you're comparing yourself to normal separations and divorce. Like, you can't. These are really extreme cases, at least that our audience is dealing with. And there's people who do get it. We have a weekly legal abuse support group that meets on Sundays. We have men and women from all over the world dealing with that same kind of dynamic. And so you feel less alone and less isolated when you hear everybody explaining that basically the same thing, especially in terms of the emotional abuse and how children are weaponized and what we can do about it rather than just complaining about it. Because there's a lot that we can do. But Nikki, I know we're almost at time. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on, especially for me being your first Instagram Live. But can you tell people how to find you?
Yes, so I'm on here as Legally Nik, and I'm on TikTok as Legally Nik. But just, those two at the moment. And thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. I hope I've imparted a little bit of wisdom, and thank you.
Sure, and I'm going to be following up about that whole thing with Cafcass and evaluators. We can do another thing with that later.
That's a whole topic on its own. I get it.
Yes, but thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.